It began with whispers in the cold, thin air that wrapped around Fairbanks like a ghostly shroud. People said the darkness felt heavier that winter, that the night stretched longer than usual, swallowing the town whole before anyone could notice. The snow fell endlessly, silencing footsteps, muffling screams, and making it impossible to tell what was real and what was imagined. The locals spoke of a shadow that lingered just beyond the glow of streetlights, moving through the tree line with the patience of a predator. They called him the Fairbanks Phantom, a name that started as a joke among bar patrons but soon spread across town as the disappearances began. No one knew what he looked like. No one could describe his face, but everyone claimed to feel his presence. A chill at the back of their neck, a whisper in the wind, a flicker of movement in the corner of their eye. The first to vanish was a young woman named Emily North. She was 25, a freelance photographer who'd come to Alaska chasing the beauty of the northern lights. Friends described her as fearless, the kind of person who wandered into the wild alone and returned with stories worth listening to. But one night she didn't come back. Her car was found parked near the frozen Chena River, the keys still in the ignition, her camera on the passenger seat, the lens cap off as if she'd stopped suddenly to take a picture. Search teams combed the area for days. The temperature dropped to 20 below, and even the dogs struggled to keep the scent. On the third day, they found her. She was half buried in the snow, her skin pale as porcelain, eyes wide open and fixed on the dark sky above. Her scarf was wound tightly around her neck, tied with precision. The official report called it accidental hypothermia. Locals weren't convinced. Emily's best friend, Claire Monroe, refused to believe it was an accident. She had known Emily since college, and Emily was careful, always cautious when shooting in remote areas. Something about it felt wrong. When Claire went through her friend's belongings, she noticed Emily's phone was missing. Her last photo, uploaded automatically to the cloud, showed a blur of light streaking across the trees. It wasn't an aurora or a star. It looked like a reflection of someone moving. That night, Claire began her own search, retracing Emily's steps from the riverside to the last cafe she visited. The barista remembered her well, said she seemed nervous, kept looking over her shoulder as if someone were following her. She left in a hurry, her coffee untouched. Claire began to feel that same sensation as she walked the same streets. Eyes on her, always just behind her. Her back door would be found slightly open in the mornings, even though she was certain she had locked it. One night, she saw footprints in the fresh snow outside her bedroom window, leading straight from the woods. They stopped just beneath the glass, then disappeared as if whoever had been there simply melted into the night. She called the police, but they brushed it off as paranoia. The long winter nights played tricks on people, they said. She should try to get some rest. But how could she sleep when every creak of the house sounded like someone moving closer? A week later, another woman disappeared. This time, a nurse named Carla Winters, who worked at Fairbanks Memorial Hospital. Her car was found near the same river, doors unlocked, engine cold. The pattern was too close to be coincidence. Then another. A college student. Then a waitress from a bar near the edge of town. Each vanished during the dark hours, each leaving behind traces that didn't fit together but somehow felt connected. It was as though someone was collecting pieces of people's lives and stitching them into a puzzle only he understood. Claire tried to talk to Detective Aaron Vale, the officer assigned to the missing persons cases. He was quiet, methodical, and worn down from years of chasing unsolved leads across the state. At first, he dismissed the idea of a serial killer, saying Fairbanks was small, that random disappearances weren't uncommon in the brutal Alaskan winters. But when Claire showed him the blurred photo from Emily's camera and the pattern of the locations where the victims had vanished, something changed in his eyes. He promised to look into it. though he warned her not to get involved. That warning came too late. The town began to change. Once friendly neighbors stopped venturing out after dusk. The streets emptied early, and the sound of laughter that usually drifted from the bars was replaced by tense silence. The local paper ran a headline about the winter stalker, but it was the name Fairbanks Phantom that stuck. It fit the mood too perfectly, a presence that couldn't be seen, only felt. There were stories of people waking in the night to see a figure standing at the edge of their yards, watching but never moving closer. Hunters reported hearing voices echoing through the woods, calling names that weren't theirs. Some said they found strange patterns carved into the ice, circles connected by thin lines like threads of a spider's web. No one could explain them, and soon no one wanted to try. For Claire, the fear turned into obsession. Every clue she found, every rumor she heard pulled her deeper. She learned that all the missing women had been to the same place before vanishing. A small roadside bar called the Frost Line, known for its flickering neon sign and a jukebox that skipped the same song every night. She went there one evening, sitting in the same booth Emily had used. The bartender eyed her with suspicion when she asked about her friend. "Lots of people come through here," he said flatly. "Not everyone leaves." When she pressed, he only shrugged. "It's Alaska. People disappear all the time." But Claire noticed something odd about the place. A wall near the back had a series of photos. Regulars, travelers, people who'd stopped by. Her breath caught when she saw Emily's face among them. The picture had been taken just days before her death, and below it, written faintly in red ink, was a word she could barely read. It looked like thread. When she turned to ask about it, the bartender was gone. The music had stopped. Only the hum of the old neon sign filled the silence. Claire left quickly, stepping into the biting cold, her heart pounding. Across the street, she thought she saw movement, a silhouette standing by the lamppost. She couldn't make out a face, only the outline of a figure in a heavy coat, unmoving, watching her. She took a step back, blinked, and the figure was gone. The only trace left was a single footprint in the snow that led nowhere. That night, as the northern lights flickered faintly over the town, Claire stood at her window, staring into the dark woods that bordered her yard. Somewhere out there, the phantom was real. Somewhere he was watching. The air was so still she could hear the creak of the trees and the soft crunch of something moving in the snow. Her breath caught. There, between the branches, a faint glint of red light flickered like a thread catching the moon. It disappeared as quickly as it came, leaving only silence. Claire didn't sleep that night. She knew now that the Fairbanks Phantom wasn't just a story. He was real, and he had seen her. Detective Aaron Vale had been with the Alaska State Troopers for over 15 years, and in all that time he had seen things that could break the mind of an ordinary man. Frozen bodies pulled from rivers, hunters who never came back from the forest, aircraft wreckage scattered like confetti across the tundra. But this was different. This was human, deliberate, and patient. It was something that stalked instead of struck. It was something that planned. The Fairbanks Phantom had turned rumor into nightmare, and every time Aaron thought he saw a pattern, the snow buried the truth again. He sat in his office late one night, surrounded by files and photos. The walls were plastered with faces: Emily North, Carla Winters, Lily Heron, and 3 others, all young women, all gone within 3 months. The forensic reports offered no consistency. Some victims had ligature marks. Others didn't. Some were missing personal items. Others weren't. But every photo had one thing in common. Somewhere on their clothing, barely visible, was a single red thread. It wasn't random. It was precise, deliberately placed. Aaron leaned closer to one photo and could see it clearly now. A single strand looped around a buttonhole. tied so delicately it could have been overlooked by anyone but a man obsessed. When the lab confirmed that all 6 threads came from the same type of fabric, one rarely found in commercial stores, Aaron's instincts sharpened. He had worked in Alaska long enough to know that nothing this careful happened by chance. He began to trace the material, calling every tailor, craft store, and sewing supplier in the Fairbanks region. Only one shop sold that specific thread, a small tailoring and repair shop near the airfield called Hart's Mendery, owned by a woman named Evelyn Hart. Evelyn had lived in Fairbanks her whole life. A quiet, solitary woman in her late 40s, she was known to fix everything from parkas to pilot uniforms. When Aaron arrived at her shop, the bell above the door chimed softly. The interior smelled faintly of wool and wood polish. Shelves lined the walls, filled with spools of thread in every color imaginable. Evelyn sat behind a sewing machine, her head bent over a jacket, the needle moving with hypnotic precision. When she looked up, her eyes were tired but alert, as if she'd been expecting him. "You're the detective," she said before he could introduce himself. Her voice was gentle, the kind that carried sadness even in ordinary words. "I heard about the girls. It's awful." Aaron studied her closely. Her hands moved constantly, even when she wasn't sewing, fingers twitching as if searching for something to fix. "You sell this kind of thread?" he asked, showing her the sample in a small evidence bag. Evelyn's eyes flicked to it for only a moment before she nodded. "Yes, that's mine. I've used it for years. Durable, doesn't fray in the cold." "Have you sold it to anyone recently?" "Not that I can recall," she said softly, threading her needle again. "Most people bring their clothes to me instead of buying materials. They trust me to handle the work." "Do you remember any of the victims?" Evelyn paused, her needle freezing midair. "Emily North," she whispered after a long silence. "She brought in a coat. The lining was torn, said she wanted it ready before her trip to the river." Her eyes met Aaron's, suddenly nervous. "Why do you ask?" "Because someone's leaving your thread on dead women," he said. The needle slipped from her hand, falling soundlessly onto the table. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it, and for a brief moment Aaron thought she might break down. Instead, she straightened her back and forced a small smile. "Detective, you can't think I had anything to do with that." "I don't know what to think yet," he replied, watching her reaction carefully. "But I'll need to ask you not to leave town for a while." She nodded but didn't speak. When Aaron left the shop, the cold wind bit at his face, and for a moment, he could have sworn he saw someone standing in the shadows behind the building. By the time he turned his flashlight that way, there was nothing but swirling snow. The next morning, the shop was gone. Fire had devoured the building during the night, leaving only a smoldering skeleton of charred wood and ash. Evelyn Hart was nowhere to be found. Firefighters said it started near the basement, but no one could determine how. When investigators sifted through the wreckage, they discovered something beneath the burned floorboards, a trap door leading to a hidden room. What they found inside chilled even the most hardened officers. It was filled with mannequins, dozens of them, all dressed in coats, scarves, and sweaters belonging to the missing women. Each mannequin had a red thread sewn into its clothing, tied in the same delicate knot. The faces were painted crudely, eyes wide open in imitation of the victims. Some wore wigs made from real hair. There were photographs pinned to the walls, Polaroids of the women alive, smiling, unaware they were being watched. Aaron stood in that dim, ash-covered room for nearly an hour without moving. The smell of smoke mixed with the faint scent of fabric and glue. It wasn't Evelyn's handiwork. It was something far darker. Something that had used her skill, her shop, and maybe even her fear. She might have been helping someone, or she might have been another victim. The press swarmed the story, calling it the seamstress chamber. The town erupted in panic. For the first time, the state troopers acknowledged that the Fairbanks Phantom wasn't just legend. But without Evelyn, they had no leads, no suspect, and no body. Some thought she'd set the fire herself to escape. Others whispered that she'd been silenced by the phantom. Claire followed the case obsessively. When she heard about Evelyn, she remembered something from Emily's apartment. A receipt for a coat repair at Hart's Mendery, dated just 2 days before Emily died. She contacted Aaron, telling him she'd spoken to Evelyn once too, and that the woman seemed frightened even back then. They met at the station, the air heavy with exhaustion and fear. She knew something, Claire said quietly. Emily told me Evelyn acted strange. She said someone else had been in the shop while she waited. A man who didn't speak, Aaron frowned. Did she describe him? Tall, wearing a maintenance jacket, maybe from the airport. That detail hit him like a spark. The airfield, the hangars, the missing women, all had traveled recently, some arriving by plane. The Phantom wasn't picking random victims. He was choosing travelers, people who would vanish without anyone noticing right away. Fairbanks was a perfect hunting ground, a transient town where people came and went with the weather. Aaron ordered a background check on all airport employees, focusing on maintenance workers and ground crew. Dozens of names came up, but one stood out. Raymond Pike, 38, formerly employed at Anchorage International, fired after an incident involving harassment and property damage. He'd relocated to Fairbanks and taken a job maintaining the hangars near the same airfield where Evelyn's shop once stood. No address was listed on file, just a P.O. box. Aaron drove out there that night with a search warrant and 2 deputies. The hangars were silent, lit only by the flicker of failing lights. Snow crunched under their boots as they approached Hangar 3, the one listed under Pike's old records. The door was locked, but inside they could hear something faint, a rhythmic sound like the hum of a sewing machine. When they broke the lock and stepped in, the machine stopped. The hangar was empty, but in the center of the floor stood a chair. On it was a folded maintenance jacket, and on top of that, a red thread coiled neatly into a spiral. The air smelled faintly of gasoline. Before Aaron could move, he heard the click of a lighter. The flame flickered from the shadows at the back of the hangar, then vanished. They barely escaped before the explosion ripped through the structure, sending metal and smoke into the frozen sky. When the fire cleared, there was no sign of Pike. Only a charred metal spool of red thread remained, still warm to the touch. As Aaron stood in the snow staring at the burning wreckage, Claire's voice echoed in his head. Someone else had been in Evelyn's shop. Someone who didn't speak. Someone patient enough to watch, to wait, and to build his collection one victim at a time. The Fairbanks Phantom wasn't done. He was only getting started. The cold in Fairbanks had a way of sinking into the bones, of finding every weakness in a person and reminding them how small they truly were against the weight of the Alaskan wilderness. Weeks had passed since the hangar explosion, and though investigators called it an accident, Detective Aaron Vale knew better. The Phantom was alive. He had planned every step, from Evelyn Hart's disappearance to the fire that destroyed her shop, to the evidence he left behind like breadcrumbs leading nowhere. The press had gone quiet. The public had begun to forget. But Aaron hadn't. The case had dug into him like frostbite, spreading through his thoughts until even sleep became another investigation. Every night he dreamed of mannequins and red threads twisting around his wrists. Every morning he woke with the same question. How do you catch a ghost that knows you're looking for him? Claire hadn't stopped searching either. She had tried to leave Fairbanks, to put the nightmare behind her, but every time she thought she could breathe again, something pulled her back. Sometimes it was the wind that whistled like a voice outside her window. Sometimes it was the sound of footsteps that stopped when she turned around. Then came the letter. No return address, just her name written neatly in red ink across the envelope. Inside was a single note, "You're close. The truth waits where the planes sleep." It had to be the airfield. She tried to ignore it at first, but the words gnawed at her until she couldn't resist. On a bitterly cold night when the moon was hidden and the sky was nothing but ink and silence, she drove to the Fairbanks airfield. The gate was locked, but she found a section of fence bent near the ground and slipped through. Her flashlight beam cut through the dark, catching glints of metal, frozen puddles, and the hollow shapes of hangars looming like blackened teeth. Hangar 3 was gone, just a patch of scorched earth and twisted steel. But beyond it stood Hangar 7, an older building rarely used anymore. The lock was rusted, the door slightly open. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of dust and fuel. Her light swept across the room, catching on a line of uniforms hanging neatly on a rack. Each had a red thread stitched somewhere, a sleeve, a collar, a pocket. Claire's breath caught in her throat. There were photographs pinned to the wall, Polaroids just like those found beneath Evelyn's shop. Only these were more recent. She saw Emily, Carla, Lily all smiling, alive, taken from a distance. And then she froze. There was another photo, one she recognized instantly. It was her, standing outside her own house looking out the window. The caption written beneath it in red ink read, "The last stitch." Her heart pounded so hard she thought the sound would give her away. Somewhere behind her something moved, a soft metallic scrape. She turned the flashlight toward the noise and caught the faintest glimpse of a figure. A man, tall, wearing a dark maintenance jacket. He didn't move. He just watched her, the light reflecting off something cold in his hand. "You shouldn't have come here." His voice was calm, almost polite, but hollow, as if spoken through a mask of ice. Claire stepped back, her mind racing for a way out. "Who are you?" she managed to whisper. The man tilted his head, the faint light glinting off his pale face. "You already know." He stepped forward, and she saw the red thread looped around his fingers, coiled like a snake ready to strike. He lunged, and Claire ran. The hangar door slammed behind her as she bolted into the night. The snow was thick, slowing her down, her boots slipping as she tried to find her way back to the fence. The wind howled, carrying with it the faint echo of his footsteps, steady and unhurried, as if he knew there was nowhere she could go that he couldn't follow. She stumbled, falling hard onto the ice. Her flashlight spun out of reach, rolling to a stop several feet away, its beam landing on a patch of snow that looked darker than the rest. Blood. Old, frozen blood. Her stomach turned. She crawled toward the flashlight, grabbing it just as she heard him speak again. Closer now, his tone almost affectionate. "You all come here for answers," he said softly. "You don't understand. The snow keeps the secrets. I just give them a place to rest." Claire scrambled to her feet and ran again, her breath ragged in the freezing air. Ahead, she saw the faint flash of headlights, the distant glow of a car pulling onto the airfield road. She screamed, waving her arms, praying someone would see her. The man was behind her, close enough that she could hear the crunch of his boots with every step. Just as she reached the fence, a hand caught her coat and yanked her backward. She twisted, swung the flashlight, and it struck him in the face. He staggered, not yelling, not angry, just breathing harder, as if more amused than hurt. She didn't wait to see more. She crawled under the fence, ripping her coat, and ran toward the road. The car that stopped was an unmarked state vehicle. Detective Vale jumped out, gun drawn, shouting her name. Claire collapsed in the snow, gasping, pointing toward the hangars. "He's there. He's here." Aaron ran toward the airfield, sweeping the area with his flashlight, but there was no one. Only empty snow and the whine of wind through the wreckage of the old hangar. He followed the footprints, 2 sets, hers and a man's, until they simply stopped in the middle of the runway. No exit, no tracks leading away. It was as if the man had vanished into thin air. He called it in, but even as officers surrounded the scene, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. There was something deliberate about how it all happened. The photos, the note, the chase. It was as though the Phantom had wanted Claire to come, wanted them to find this place. A message, not a mistake. Later, when the adrenaline had faded and Claire sat wrapped in a blanket in Aaron's car, she told him everything she'd seen. The photos, the red thread, the word written beneath her picture. He listened without interrupting, his face pale, eyes distant. "He's escalating," Aaron said quietly. "He's not hiding anymore." She turned to him, voice shaking. Why me? Why Emily? What does he want? Aaron didn't answer right away. He stared out at the runway, the snow blowing across it like drifting ash. Control, he finally said. He doesn't kill for pleasure. He kills to preserve, to freeze moments in time. Every thread, every knot, it's a ritual. He's not taking lives. He's curating them. Claire shuddered. That's insane. So is he, Aaron replied. Over the next few days, the investigation turned frantic. They searched every abandoned hangar, every property near the airport, even the frozen riverbeds where previous victims had been found. Nothing. No trace of Raymond Pike or anyone else who could fit the Phantom's profile. It was as if the snow itself had swallowed him. Then came the report. A hunter 50 miles north of Fairbanks claimed to have found a cabin hidden in the woods. Its door chained shut from the outside. Inside were mannequins, similar to the ones from Evelyn's shop, but arranged around a dining table. Each wore a name tag, each with a red thread through their clothing. One chair was empty, a tag resting on the seat. It said Claire. When Aaron saw the photos, his blood ran cold. The Phantom had planned everything, even the chase. Claire wasn't just another victim. She was the final piece. The red thread tied everything together. The victims, the mannequins, the fires, even the hangars. Each location formed a perfect line on the map, all converging toward one point deep in the forest. That night, Aaron went there alone, unable to wait for backup. The cold was merciless, the snow falling so heavily it blurred the trees into ghostly silhouettes. He found the cabin easily. It was real, just as the hunter described. But inside, there were no mannequins, no furniture, no signs of life. Only one thing on the floor. A single Polaroid photo of Claire sitting in his office, taken without her knowing. Written beneath it in red thread was one word, almost. And somewhere outside, from the darkness of the trees, came the faintest sound of a needle pulling through fabric. The snow didn't stop that winter. It fell day after day, covering Fairbanks in silence so deep that even sound seemed afraid to move. The town tried to forget what had happened, but forgetting was impossible when the air still carried that unease, that feeling that someone unseen was still moving among them. The papers stopped printing stories about the Fairbanks Phantom, claiming the case was closed after the airfield incident, but everyone knew better. The Phantom had never been caught. His name was still whispered in bars, in schools, in hushed conversations when the power went out and darkness swallowed the streets. People stopped walking alone. They double-locked their doors. They watched the tree lines at night. Detective Aaron Vale stayed in Fairbanks long after he was supposed to transfer. He told himself it was unfinished business, but deep down he knew it was something else. The case had become part of him, wound around his life like the same red thread that had marked every victim. His superiors wanted him to take time off, to clear his head. But Aaron couldn't rest. The photo from the cabin haunted him, the one of Claire sitting in his office, taken when she hadn't even known it. That single word written below it in red thread, almost, circled in his thoughts like a curse. He started noticing small things first. A mug on his desk that wasn't where he left it. His car door open in the morning. Footprints in the snow, outside his apartment that led to his window and then disappeared. He tried to tell himself it was exhaustion, the paranoia that came from living too long inside a nightmare. But then one morning, he found something impossible. On his kitchen table was a Polaroid photo. It showed him asleep in his bed. Beneath it, in red thread, the words, "You see me now." Aaron stopped sleeping after that. He spent his nights combing through evidence, convinced that he had missed something that would lead him back to the truth. The threads, the mannequins, the fires, everything was planned, deliberate. The Phantom wasn't acting on impulse. He was building something, a pattern, a story. and Aaron had become part of it without realizing. Claire had left town, but Fairbanks never really let people go. She moved south to Anchorage, tried to rebuild her life, but the nightmares followed her there. She'd wake in the middle of the night certain that someone was standing in her room. She'd turn on the light and there'd be nothing. Once she found a red thread on her pillow. She told herself it was her imagination, that trauma had ways of tricking the mind into seeing ghosts that weren't there. But then, 3 weeks after she left Fairbanks, she got another letter. It was postmarked from a nearby town she'd never been to. Inside was a single Polaroid of Aaron sitting at his desk in the precinct. On the back was a message in red ink. He's closer to you than he knows. Terrified, she called Aaron. He answered on the first ring, his voice rough and distant. "Claire," he said. "I was going to call you. Something's happening here." They agreed to meet halfway between Anchorage and Fairbanks at a small roadside diner. It was nearly midnight when she arrived, the roads slick with ice and the windows fogged from the cold. Aaron sat in a booth at the back, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. He slid a small folder across the table to her. Inside were photos, new ones. Victims found in nearby towns. Same pattern, same thread. The Phantom was still killing, only now he was moving farther from Fairbanks, spreading outward like a virus. "This one," Aaron said, pointing to a photo of a young woman found outside Talk. She worked at an airstrip, same red thread on her jacket. He's expanding his hunting ground. Claire felt her stomach twist. "You think he's following us?" Aaron looked up slowly, his jaw tight. "No, I think we're following him, and he wants it that way." As if to prove his words, the diner lights flickered. Outside, a truck passed by, its headlights cutting through the fog. When the glare faded, Claire caught sight of something in the window, a shape standing by the edge of the road, a man motionless watching the diner. She froze, heart pounding. "Aaron," she whispered. He turned, but by then the window was empty again. They left the diner together, Aaron insisting on following her car back toward Anchorage. The snow began to fall harder, covering the road in white until the headlights barely cut through it. Halfway down the stretch of highway, Claire's car sputtered and died. She coasted to a stop on the shoulder, the engine refusing to turn over. Aaron pulled up behind her, his flashlight cutting through the storm as he approached. She rolled down her window. "The car just stopped," she said, voice shaking. He nodded, glancing toward the dark woods that flanked the road. The snow muffled everything, making the world feel sealed off, smaller. "Get in my car," he said. "We'll come back for it later." As she stepped out, she heard it, a faint crunch of footsteps behind them. Slow, deliberate. Aaron swung the flashlight around, its beam landing on a figure standing at the tree line, a man in a heavy coat, head tilted, unmoving. Aaron drew his gun. "State troopers, show your hands." The figure didn't move. The flashlight flickered, and when it steadied again, the man was gone. They got into Aaron's car and drove the rest of the way in silence. Neither spoke about what they'd seen. But when they reached Anchorage and pulled into the hotel parking lot, they found something waiting on the hood of Claire's car, a Polaroid. It showed the two of them standing outside the diner, taken from across the street. The caption below read, "You're right where I need you." By morning, Aaron was gone. His car was found abandoned near the highway, his gun still in the glove compartment. The snow around it was undisturbed. No footprints leading away, no sign of struggle. It was as if the night had swallowed him whole. Claire reported it to the police, but they treated it like another disappearance. The file grew cold before it even began. She went back to Anchorage, numb and hollow, feeling like the only survivor of a nightmare that refused to end. Weeks later, a package arrived at the Fairbanks Police Department with no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Detective Aaron Vale standing in front of a burned building, the remains of Hart's Mendery. The picture had been taken from a distance, the angle too precise to be random, and beneath it, stitched carefully into the paper with red thread, were 3 words: "You missed one." That was the moment Fairbanks knew. The phantom was still out there. He had never left. The fires, the threads, the mannequins, all of it was part of something larger. A pattern so vast it stretched beyond the town itself. The case was reopened quietly, but no one spoke of it publicly. People needed to believe the monster was gone, even if deep down they knew he wasn't. Every year as winter returned and the first snow fell, new whispers began again. Hunters would find strange markings carved into trees. Travelers swore they saw figures watching from the side of the highway. And every so often someone would vanish without a trace, leaving behind only one clue: a single red thread caught in their clothing, tied into a perfect knot. Claire never returned to Fairbanks, but she never escaped it either. Sometimes when she stayed up too late, she would hear the faint hum of a sewing machine through her apartment wall. Sometimes she'd find Polaroids slipped under her door, pictures of streets she'd just walked, of people she'd passed. And in every photo, somewhere in the background, blurred by distance, a shadow stood watching her. The Fairbanks phantom had no face, no name, no past. He was part of the land itself now, hidden beneath the ice, stitched into the snow like the threads he left behind. Fairbanks learned to live with him the way people live with winter, quietly, fearfully, waiting for it to pass but knowing it never truly does. Because in Alaska the dark never goes away. It only waits for the light to fade, and when it does, he moves again, unseen, unstoppable, and patient as death itself.